Hey everybody, welcome back to the Rev and Evan channel. I'm REVan Evan, and tonight we're trying something a little bit different. I'm at my home in Tampa, Florida, and Brian, as you can see, Brian Wolfe is at his place in Willis, Michigan. We've got some cool information to share with you tonight about the Godzilla engine, and we couldn't wait till my next trip up to Detroit. So we're going to try something new and do a little podcast style YouTube video. We hope you enjoy it. We're going to bring you some great information. We're going to talk about 7.3 Godzilla and some changes that went on between the earlier models and the 2023 models, and maybe some stuff that's coming up in the future. Brian, what do we got?
All right. Yes, as you can see, we have several parts on the table which are new from 2023 versus the previous model years. First thing I'd like to start with is the throttle bodies. So this is the original throttle body that came out in 2020. In 2023, they upgraded the throttle body as well as the intake manifold. The intake manifold looks very similar, but there are some differences on the hookups to the ventilation systems. But the big thing is we're going from 80 to 87. So this is a really nice increase in throttle body size. When I did test the 2023 model year intake and throttle body versus a 2020 through 2022 on an engine that made 600 to 625 horsepower, we picked up about 10-ish horsepower and 5 to 8 foot-pounds of peak torque. So if you have a package that permits the upward throttle body, the 2023 definitely provides an advantage. Also, when you're doing looking for used engines, either out of a wreck or out of something else, the 2023 would be an advantage with that regard. Next thing I'd like to jump on is the coils. So one of the differences between the 20 and 23 engines is the 23 engine incorporates a smart coil. The 2020 through 22 is, if you will, a dumb coil, which requires drivers in the ECU. They look identical. You could look at the part numbers, but instead of taking the time to memorize the part numbers, you can just look in the connector. The smart coil has 3 terminals. The dumb coil, if you will, has only 2. So that's an easy way to tell the difference between the two.
So, Brian, for the layperson, what is the real performance difference or drivability difference between a smart coil and we'll call it a dumb coil?
To be open, there really isn't a benefit drivability wise. It's really where is the driver for the coil. So a smart coil has a driver built into it, so to drive the current, where a dumb coil relies on the ECU to drive it. So it really is more of a compatibility issue with the ECUs. Speaking compatibility, another thing, the oil pressure sender. So the stock sender is a very nice unit. A lot of the aftermarket systems plug into the ECU, plug into the factory oil pressure sender. However, in 2023, he went to Cent protocol versus conventional analog protocol. Now, I don't know all the differences that makes in the ECU to make it compatible. They both have 3 prongs in it, but obviously one is an ivory color on the connector, where the other one from the 2020 through 2022 is black. Moving on, one of the significant differences that I wasn't thrilled about is the rocker arms. So the rocker arms 20 through 22 are an investment cast rocker, roller, of course, that are caged. When you look at the 2023 and beyond, it goes to a stamp rocker. I'm sure a very stiff rocker. Again, being retired since the end of 2017, I don't have the inside track on the performance differences. But just having a bit of knowledge about Ford, they're not going to probably back away from the stiffness. That being said, given the choice, I would obviously prefer to go with investment cast versus a stamp rocker arm, given if I had the choice on that. So that would be one thing where I'd say I wasn't as thrilled about to see on the 23 versus the previous model years.
Is that strictly a strength issue?
Well, I think probably the reason they did it, as you know, every manufacturer needs to find efficiencies or cost offsets going through to overcome headwinds. So I'm sure they did this as a, for a cost reduction on the engine. However, from a stiffness or reliability, I'm sure that they also passed all their internal durability tests. I'm just looking at it from, the outside now, saying from a robustness perspective to, if you will, unintended noise factors, which might include a lot higher loading that you might get with an aftermarket camshaft, aftermarket springs. I want to go with the cage rollers and the investment cast rocker versus the stamp. I'm sure for a stock camshaft, stock valve spring loads, this is going to live just fine. That being said, we know the performance industry, we're going to want to make it hop it up a little bit. And that's why I would prefer the investment cast. Okay. Moving along, water pumps. So water pump externally looks, looking at it from that direction looks the same. However, if we turn them around, you can immediately see a large difference in the pump portion of the water pump itself. So the 23 and beyond has a much smaller impeller on it to pump the fluid. And that's good. I mean, if I'm going in a Fox body Mustang, drag car, something that doesn't see, heavy loading for a long period of time, this is going to be a performance advantage. And the higher RPM you're spinning the engine, if you're maintaining an engine-driven water pump, the more power you're going to see. Now, when I run the dyno here, I run an electric water pump, so I don't even, see, if you will, the losses to the pump. Rumor has it that, when you're talking, 6,500 RPM of the engine, there could be, as much as, 10-ish horsepower different. So, racers, the street guys, they're going to be happy with this. If you're running an endurance vehicle or if you're running a tow vehicle, and, you might prefer the older pump.
So, Brian, is the 23 pump compatible with earlier engines? Can you simply just swap the pump if you want to use the 23 pump on an earlier engine?
Yes, that's my understanding.
I'll take free horsepower any day of the week, or at least for the price of a stock water pump housing anyway.
Yeah, I think I remember when I bought this, it was more than I thought from the dealer, but it wasn't like stupid expensive. It was more than 100, less than $200 type thing. So not trivial, but not ridiculous either. Last thing I've got on the table here are the pistons. Now, one thing I want to mention, because I've seen a lot of talk on the internet, people look at the top and they say, oh, it's a forged piston because it's machined. Well, you can machine a casting. So they're still cast pistons from in the 23 as well as the previous. So they're a cast hyper-eutectic piston. Works great on, applications up to, I would say, a certain speed or a certain power level. And then you've got a cast piston. Now, what they did, when you look at these close, where the top ring is, they did change that insert. And I believe they changed it for more robustness to detonation, for production type calibrations. I think from an aftermarket perspective, from someone that's going to try to pump an extra 100 horsepower out, I don't think it makes a difference for that. If you have to run sub-premium fuel and maybe don't have a robust calibration, you might have a little bit of advantage with the 23 model year piston. That being said, if I'm changing pistons, I'm putting an aftermarket forged piston in anyways. But again, I thought it was, and I think that this piston's like, and this piston is, when we do like an aftermarket set of pistons, they're, anywhere from $1,000, $1,100 to $1,250, $1,300 for pistons, rings, and pins. I think these pistons alone were on the order of $70, $75 just for the piston by itself. So again, you're better off if you're going to do a replacement, go to the aftermarket piston. So that's a quick summary of some of the changes, but I thought it was important, to get people, to people understand what's different. Because again, if you got a new engine and you plug in like a wiring that maybe some of, I know Jolt has harnesses, OBR has harnesses, and you're not aware of what electronics you have, things may not work quite right, and you might be disappointed. Like, hey, I can't read oil pressure anymore, or geez, the coils aren't working right. Well, that's because you got to worry about the electronic compatibility. Um, Hopefully, rumor has it that at PRI there might be a new rocker arm announced that fits in the stock cylinder head that is adjustable by an aftermarket manufacturer. So I'm very excited that may be announced close to PRI. That being said, if you did end up with the 23 model year piston, or 23 model year engine, and you're looking to put high performance cam springs in, you're going to want to look to see if you can find a set of the older rockers, in my opinion. Good news on the throttle bodies again, bigger. I think right now, like this first year, you could buy the intake and the throttle body for about $550 from a dealer to pick up that 10 horsepower if you've got a package that permits.
Man, Brian, that's some great information. I think I'll ask you one more question before we sign off for the night. And that is with you probably get this question quite often. Is there a horsepower level at which you really should be putting pistons, rods? And I know that lifters are the big talk about Godzillas. Is there a hard, I know that you're not big on hard, fast rules with that stuff because it really depends on how the engine is used. But at what point do you like to see an aftermarket lifter and perhaps an aftermarket piston and rod? Because I know we're going to get that question in the comments.
Sure. So it's a couple things. So let's start with the lifters you mentioned. So again, like everybody else, I don't have any inside information, so I can't tell you exactly what the root cause of those early lifter failures were that we saw in some of the engines. My gut feel is there was probably some type of supplier quality issue on that roller that caused it to Burnell and have the failures that we saw. So I'd be shocked if that's not corrected in production. But corrected in production means it's going to live with stock spring loads, stock camshaft accelerations, etc. And I believe that on like most of the milder, like I call it like an entry level cam, there's, so many manufacturers that have cams out already and that are going to have cams. So if you're picking one of their mild cams, my belief is if you've got like a 22 or later model your engine, I'm just saying 22, it could be 21, it could be, there's probably a build date for the corrected that lifter issue. You're probably fine with the stock stuff. When you start to go with the more aggressive and you're going to be spinning the engine, 6,800, 7,200, 7,800 RPM, that's where I start to say you probably need something more robust on the lifters. I've used Johnson lifters on most of the stuff that we've done. There are other alternatives that are being worked on, which are a better price point than the Johnson stuff. The Johnson stuff is super premium. It's like going right to Lincoln, the Lincoln, if you will, of the lifters. But there are going to be other alternatives, I think, very shortly that are going to become more known and available. The other thing is if you go boost, because when you're opening against more cylinder pressure, on the exhaust side particularly is where we did start to see our first lifter failures. So I do push people that are going boost and RPM, go to the lifter as well. As far as pistons and rods. So I answer that when people ask me a question two ways, one for a naturally aspirated engine and one for a boosted engine. So without doing the durability work myself, I have a lot of confidence in ProCharger and Whipple and their engineering teams. So they have a kit available for this Ford Super Duties that, is designed to go into a Super Duty, and neither ProCharger or Whipple want to release something that the customer is going to have a problem down the road with. So I tell people, if you go with their pulley sizes that they came with and you got a stock bottom end, my belief is you'll be fine. So that's what I talk on the boost side. If you go on the naturally aspirated side or a builded boost engine where you're going to run more boost, more RPM, I kind of draw the line somewhere around arbitrarily. So people will argue this and say, well, I know, I had my buddy Joe and he went to, 6,800 all the time down the drag strip and hasn't had a problem. And I would say, yeah. So if you go beyond 63, 6,400 on an ongoing basis is where I like to see piston and rods going to the end.
That's great information, Brian.
Okay, well, thanks. Yep, and hopefully that helps some people and understand what's new as we start to get into the production updates of the Godzilla going forward.
All right, Brian, I appreciate your time. I know the Godzilla community appreciates everything you're doing to move the technology forward. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If I couldn't be up in Detroit, this is the next best thing. Please don't forget, leave a comment, like our video. And Brian, what do we like to say?
Hit that subscribe button, bitches. We're hitting 50,000 subscribers pretty soon.
All right. Thanks a lot. Appreciate you guys watching and have a great day.